Hello, sixth graders. This is Mr. Burns from the Boathouse, and today we're going to talk about heat transfer. I'm going to have you pull out your science notebook and a pencil to write with. Open up your science notebook to your table of contents, and we're going to update it. I'll have you write down 4-12-21 if you're part of cohort B, or 4-13-21 if you're part of cohort A. Our topic is heat transfer notes, and the page number is 51. So if you want to add that to your table of contents right now, that would be good. Remember today, as you're taking notes, anything that's highlighted in yellow, like you see on the screen, needs to be copied into your science notebook. If I move too quickly, feel free to pause the video, get yourself caught up on the note taking, and hit play and keep going on. Once you're done updating your table of contents, I'm going to have you go to page 51 in your notebook and put the title in at the very top, heat transfer notes, the date, and page 51. Today we're going to focus on this topic called heat transfer. And when we talk about heat, it's a form of energy that's transferred from one object to another because of a difference in temperature. And there's three ways that you can transfer heat. One is through conduction, the next one is convection, and the third one is radiation. And today we're going to take a look at conduction, convection, and radiation. Okay, let's focus on convection first. So what is it? Well, convection, it's the motion of a fluid, which a fluid could be a liquid or air, that moves away from the heat source and carries the heat with it. Examples of heat transfer through convection could be a convection oven, which uses a fan to circulate the air so the hot air rises and the cold air sinks, or heating water in a pot like you see in the picture where the hot water is going to rise and the cold water sinks. Okay, so it's the transfer of heat within liquids or gases. And some of the best examples I think of when I think of heat transfer using convection is your house. If you think about the temperature of your house, so a lot of people in their house have a bedroom upstairs up on the top level, and up on the top level it is typically a lot warmer than when you go to your basement, which is a lot cooler. So if you think about your house where sometimes you're upstairs at the top level and how much warmer it is, and you go way down to your basement and how much colder it is, there's a huge temperature difference between that. Well, that's because of heat transfer called convection. And what's happening there is the hot air in your house rises and the cold air sinks. So whether it's the summer or it's the winter, your basement's typically going to be the coldest part of your house, and the upstairs is going to be the warmest part of your house. Another example I can think of is sometimes you're swimming in a lake in the summer, or sometimes you have boats and you jump off the boat and you're swimming around, and one thing you'll notice about the temperature of the lake is it's a lot colder when you're in the lake down by your ankles and feet, and it's a lot warmer up by your shoulders. Well, again, that's because of convection, that heat transfer, where the warmer water rises towards the surface of the lake and the colder water sinks. So that is essentially an example of heat transfer through convection. The second way we can transfer heat is something called conduction, which sounds very similar to the word we just talked about, convection. But conduction, what is it? Well, conduction is the transfer of heat through direct contact. And this can occur in solids, liquids, gases. So some examples of conduction are this: heating a pan on a stove. Well, when you heat a pan on stove, the pan warms up because of conduction. So as the burner of the stove gets hot, it transfers heat to the pan. The burner and the pan are in direct contact. Taking a baking sheet out of an oven. Typically, when you take a baking sheet out of the oven, you put on an oven mitt so you don't burn yourself. Because if you reach in there and grab the baking sheet, you're gonna burn yourself because of how hot it is. Direct contact there. Or holding an ice cube in your hand. Okay, since the ice cube is in direct contact with your hand, what happens? Heat is transferred to the ice cube, cause it to start melting, and you have liquid water there. If we look at the examples or the pictures on the screen there, you see somebody ironing a shirt. Well, that's an example of heat transfer through conduction because the hot iron is in direct contact with the shirt. Or the picture on the right with the candle, and looks like the person there is holding kind of a metal stick. Well, as they heat the metal stick, it gets hotter and hotter, and since that person is holding the other end of it, direct contact, their hand is going to get hotter and hotter, and it might get to the point where it's so hot they have to let go of it or they'll burn themselves. Okay? So conduction is the transfer of heat through direct contact. As a reminder, make sure you're copying anything that you see highlighted in yellow. The third way that we can transfer heat is something called radiation. Well, radiation is the transfer of thermal energy from one material to another by electromagnetic waves. So electromagnetic waves can do a lot of different things, but they are these invisible waves we can't see. And one of the things they can do is they can transfer heat from one object to another. So some examples of heat transfer through radiation is sunlight. So this time of year, when you're outdoors, oftentimes you notice it gets a little bit warmer. Okay, and sometimes it gets so warm outside that you start sweating outside. Well, the reason you're getting so hot and sweaty is because of radiation. Okay, and that radiation is coming from the sun. So through electromagnetic waves, the sun is bringing heat down to our planet and warming you up, making you hot. Now there's other ways this can be done, such as heat from a fire or a candle. I always think of, like, a lot of times people have bonfire pits in their backyards or at their cabins. That is, you sit next to that bonfire pit, you can feel the heat coming off of it. Okay, well, that's because of heat transfer through radiation. Another example is if you have a fireplace at your house, as you're maybe sitting on the couch watching TV and you can feel the heat from the fireplace, that's an example of heat transfer through radiation. Even restaurants use this. Like, a lot of restaurants have food warmers, like when the food, as they're making your food and for your family, and the food doesn't get done all at the exact same time, what they do is the meals that they finish first, they put under a heat lamp to keep the food warm while they're finishing making your meal. And the radiation from the heat lamps keeps the food warm there, so when it gets to you, it's not cold. So radiation, again, is the transfer of thermal energy from one material to another through electromagnetic waves. As you look at these pictures here, these are just some more examples to show you the three forms of heat transfer: conduction, convection, radiation. You see a picture on the left there with a house, and the sunlight is showing heat transfer through radiation. It's heating up the outside of the house. Then they show conduction with the roof there, where as the roof heats up, it's in direct contact with the rest of the house, so it's starting to heat up the house. And then inside of the house, we have convection, which is showing that the hot air rises and the cold air sinks. So the top part of your house is going to be warmer than the lower levels of it. And there's another picture to the right there. Sometimes these visuals help bring a little more clarity to understanding these three terms. All right, the last thing we're going to do is kind of like a little mini quiz. It's not, but it's just to check for your understanding and see how well you understand these three terms. what you're going to do is you're going to number your notebook page 1 through 5 and write down which form of heat transfer is represented in the examples. So you have a word bank above: conduction, convection, radiation. You're going to use that word. You're going to use those words potentially more than once. And there are examples below that you are going to match with the word conduction, convection, radiation. Feel free to use your notes you just took to help you out with this. So number 1, touching a hot pan. So if I go to touch a hot pan, heat is getting transferred from the hot pan to my hand. Is that an example of conduction, convection, or radiation? So you just got to write down that answer. Again, if you're not sure, you can look at your notes. Number 2, cookies baking in my oven. So as cookies bake in your oven, is that an example of conduction, convection, or radiation? Number 3, getting sunburned on the beach. So if you're at the beach and you get a sunburn, is that from conduction, convection, or radiation? All right, next we'll do number 4, which is drying hair with a hair dryer. Would that be an example of heat transfer through conduction, convection, or radiation? And the last one, number 5. I can feel the heat from a bonfire in my backyard. Is that heat transfer through conduction, convection, or radiation? Now, to get the answers to these, we're not going to do that today. In the upcoming days, when you're at RMS, your teachers will go over the answers to these 5 to see how well you did on them. And otherwise, that pretty much wraps up today. So make sure you have a nice day, and that is it. Goodbye.